and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer from Hoppin Frog Brewing Company out of Akron, Ohio. We've done probably 5, 6, 7 of their beers over the last couple years, though it has been quite a while. And today we're jumping into another of their really high ABV beers that they have similar nomenclature, but they're all a little bit different. Today's beer in question is Q.O.R.I.S, the Quasher. That's Q.O.R.I.S. That is the acronym for Quad Oatmeal Russian Imperial Stout. 15.7% ABV on this one. It is bourbon barrel aged. So yes, guys, very small can on a high ABV beer. 8.45 ounces specifically. Label art on this is just a clean design. These are one of the smallest beer cans you will ever see in your life. I did get this from Tavour. So we're just going to get this cracked. And I'm going to use my nice stemmed Prairie Artisan glass, which I think is going to work well for this little petite canned beer. Very dark, very thick. It is tough to get a massive head on these. I chose this glass specifically to try to help since it's narrow, and that actually did a pretty decent job. Massive aromas already coming off of this beer. So let's get right up over it for a full sniff. Oh yeah. Tons of caramel and molasses notes. The bourbon jumps right out at you. Little ribbon of vanilla. There's a lot of the roasty underpinning of this malt bill as well. So it's got a very pronounced aroma. You can get a lot of information just out of the nose. That head, you know, it formed okay, but I think it's going to mostly get out of the way. This one is very active in terms of carbonation. It's this high ABV. You know, there is a lot of sugars in there for the yeast to eat, of course, so there it is. Visually, it's absolutely pitch black. Yeah, that head is mostly settled out of the way. Just a very fine little pad floating on top with some nice cling on the side. So didn't stick around as long as I was hopeful, but I kind of expected that from this beer. Nonetheless, it looks great. It smells great. Let's just jump right in and see what this one's about. Take one. Oh, man. That is a huge beer indeed. Okay, so first things first, let's talk body and mouthfeel. Even though I had a rather small sip, first sip, because this is a high ABV, small beer, not a lot of volume with which to work, you can still really feel the beer presence. You do not have to fill the entire oral cavity with a big mouthful of beer in order to get the presence. It is a heavy beer. It is a thick beer. You can feel the weight of it when you swallow, even with a small sip, and you can really feel the thickness as you agitate on the palate. It does a very good job of coating the palate. It's quite thick. It's quite viscous. So body and mouthfeel, top tier, exactly as expected for a near as much as to call it a 16% ABV beer. In terms of the flavor profile, it's bold. It's in your face. This is one that leads very heavily with the underlying malt bill and the malt bill characteristics, but the bourbon also plays its part. So you get the bourbon accents on the nose. It smells very nice. You also get the bourbon in the flavor profile, but it's not the star of the show. This is one of those where the barrel is an added bonus to the base beer itself, but the base beer is absolutely front and center stage. So when you first swallow, you actually get a fair bit of a kick of bitters, and it's really not so much coming from any kind of hop characteristic that I'm tasting or smelling or detecting. It's coming from the roasty edge of this malt bills, which naturally have bitters in them. So this one leans very heavily into deep, deep areas of char on this Russian Imperial. Quite common. Indeed, you might even say it does start to border on slightly smoky. Not quite to Rauch beer territory, but it's not far off. There is a definite deep char and roasty bordering on smoky edge to the malt bill on this one, which is not super uncommon in a Russian Imperial, though it doesn't have to be that way. It definitely is in this one. Also worth noting, of course, this is an oatmeal stout, and we've talked about this. Oats are the single best ingredient you can add in your malt bill mix if you're trying to help with head creation and retention. But again, this beer being so active in terms of carbonation and such a petite can, it's a little tricky. If I had a big tall glass and a big tall can of this, I imagine that I could have poured beautifully and gotten a really nice, thick, voluminous head that would have stuck around a bit longer. But that being said, it is what it is. So the initial impression, body and mouthfeel are impressive indeed. Flavor profile is bold and pungent. There's a lot of information coming out of the malt bill and a lot coming out of the barrels as well. So I'm going to jump back in for a second sip, let it re-intensify. We'll talk a bit more specifics on flavor profiles here. Then we'll talk about the balance and the finish. Take two. Yeah, nice kick of bitters coming out of the malt bill up front. Nice kiss of bourbon. Nice warming sensation as it goes down. Tons of rich elements, roasty elements coming out of this malt bill. Yes, there's char. Yes, it borders on smoke. There's also slight hints of coffee coming out of the back. There's hints of dark baker's chocolate. It's kind of all of the really dark, rich kind of flavor profiles you might potentially find in a big high ABV stout are present in this beer. It's very big. It's a pungent, intense flavor. So this is one of those that people that don't like really in-your-face, flavor-forward beers. Maybe it's not for you. If you love them, then this is going to be right up your alley. So there's also a ton of nuance. So on the nose, I was getting a lot of caramel and toffee and molasses. In the flavor profile, that's also present. It does lead with more rich, almost blackstrap-like molasses, but there are also kind of lighter kind of ribbons of caramel that also pop in and out. So it's got a lot of interweaving kind of flavor traits that move in and out of one another, but it is absolutely dominated by this big roasty underpinning. So it's just a big stout, guys. It's just a big, big stout with this nice barrel aging as the added bonus. So in terms of balance, what do I think about this? Well, personally, I really, really like it. I like that the base beer style itself is front and center. It is the centerpiece, and that the barrel is the added bonus. Sometimes you can get barrels that just override the nuance in the flavor profile of the malt bill in a big stout. That is not the case here. You can taste everything that they did with it, and that, for my money, is exactly how to balance a beer. Balance, 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 and they did it right. In terms of the finish, this is quite long. You might anticipate it is a big, bold, in-your-face, very flavor-forward beer that's very thick, that coats the flavors all over the palate, and of course, it's barrel-aged on top of that. So yeah, we're talking wet, round finish, very wet, very round, with quite intense flavors lingering on the palate, even up to about the 1.5 minute mark before it slowly starts to make its descent. But it is well in excess of 2 minutes before the last vestiges are gone from the palate. And where it finishes on this is very much this deep char, slight smokiness, and still little suggestions of bourbon and blackstrap molasses floating in the back. That's where it finishes. Guys, this is a big, huge beer. I absolutely love it. This is well done. I've had quite a few of Hoppin Frog's kind of different versions of these same kind of twists on this beer. This one could be my favorite to date. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, count my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Hoppin Frog Brewing Company's Q.O.R.I.S, the Quasher, a quad oatmeal Russian Imperial Stout clocking in at 15.7% ABV. This one was barrel aged, and Hoppin Frog is based in Akron, Ohio. So guys, this was another just one of these big, yes, small can, but big beers from Hoppin Frog. This is probably the 5th or 6th beer like this I've had. And this Russian Imperial was really flavor forward. I absolutely loved it. So in general, this beer did great across the board, across all categories. But the one category it did not, you can probably already guess, is really frankly related mostly to the size of the can. So if this were a bigger can, let's just pretend for the sake of argument this was a pint. I had a nice big glass where I had plenty of room to get it poured. I think that, the head would have done a great job, and indeed that's the category that didn't get a perfect score. So on this one, it was really just low end of average. It did form a head, and it was okay, but it just got out of the way quicker than I would have liked. And frankly, it was quite active in terms of carbonation. High ABV beer, that's a bit to be expected. But I think if I had a bit more volume with which to work and could be pouring it into a larger vessel, that I could have given it a lot more agitation on the way into the glass that would have helped that head create a little bit better and stick around a little bit better. As it were, it is what it is. Low end of average, it gets a 4 out of 10. But that does leave, of course, a perfect 10 out of 10 in the remaining 9 categories. That's aroma, taste, body, mouthfeel, finish, appearance, balance, my subjective thoughts, and example of style. So the total score on Hoppin Frog's Q.O.R.I.S the Quasher is a 94 out of 100. Guys, top tier beer. If you haven't had any of these from Hoppin Frog, I get mine from Tavour. If you're not near the Ohio area to where maybe you could get these in a local bottle shop, that's where I get mine. These are all really, really awesome. They are small cans. That's by design. Very high ABV beers. Absolutely worth exploring. They have several different versions of these big stouts that are all distinctly different. This one, if you're a fan of Russian Imperials, I would absolutely highly recommend. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just hit that bell icon and turn on your notifications. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.